Ryan and Rowan narrowly escaped United Earth Systems justice at the Switchboard Station. Together with their new crew, now they must take relief supplies and personnel to the place of Ryan's nightmares, Murack Five. While tensions run high and secrets abound with the crew and passengers, the entire operation is plagued with issues that seem like more than bureaucratic red tape and could threaten their safety. Back in Sun Valley, Gunther continues recruiting cloned E entertainers towards winning their freedom. The focus group for the show, based on Ryan and Rowan's escape, leaves the set region to find their lives turned upside down. When tragedy strikes, leader Medwin's plan and pain and anger hardens into resolve, and he starts to think that playing within the system isn't as effective as taking out his vengeance personally. Decades of scheming have brought CEO Michael Strongbow's plans to fruition, but will it be enough to free clones and grant them equal rights? On two sides of the galaxy, the battle for freedom on the freedom rages on. The freedom to love, to live, to know the truth, protect those close, and make one's own choices defines every moment of every life. Perhaps the only way anyone can be free is in stories.
And hello, Internet, and welcome to the launch party for Freedom's Myth, the third book in the Freedom Saga by this gentleman right there,
Hello,
Mr.
everybody.
Stephen B. Pearl.
How's it going?
How are you doing?
I'm doing really good. Really good.
Good to
Got
hear.
got the books in yesterday and sort of looked at them and went, yeah.
Oh, it's always a great feeling. And even as a publisher, holding that first printed copy in my hand never gets old. I love it.
Yeah.
So tell us about Freedom's Myth.
Well, Freedom's Myth carries on the story of Ryan and Rowan. And Rowan is a studio clone who was used to make a full VR 5 plus emotion entertainment. And they do this in a little pseudo town that's been created, and they don't even know that they're in the far distant future. And the human controllers manipulate them to get the stories they want. Well, in Clothing Freedom, it more or less discussed how ex-war hero cloned to save his life after taking a fatal dose of radiation in his efforts in his service to his species. And as such, a second-class citizen, Ryan Chandler, who was working as a controller, liberated Rowan and had to get her out of United Earth Systems territory to the Republic territory, where she is a person under the law. Because in most areas, local law supersedes Republic law, even though Republic law is a big blanket. It has very limited areas, like space traffic control is a Republic matter. But a simple thing like slavery, well, no, that's up for the species. In Freedom's Law, Book 2, it turns out that some of the manipulations that they did to Rowan's DNA has made her extremely vulnerable, and she has health issues that have to be addressed. And they need advanced human medicine to address them. However, how can you get advanced human medicine without going into the United Earth Systems? And the essence of Freedom's Law is that there's a great quote: a hungry man is not a free man. And that sensibility really informs Freedom's Law. Yes, Rowan is free in the Republic. She's also dying. And they have to find medical facilities outside of the United Earth Systems that can treat her. and it deals largely with that. And the spin-off from that is at the end, Ryan manages to do it, and Rowan is safe, but Ryan has a criminal charge that he has to deal with, and his sentence is to go to Murack Five with relief supplies. And Murack Five is where Ryan, number one, his first body died. It took the radiation dose. But number two, there was a massive planetary level disaster, and Ryan has a great deal of post traumatic stress disorder from the reaction to that. So, Freedom's Myth involves, on a surface level, his journey from uh, the switchboard system, which is the hub where all interstellar capable races link up, from going from the switchboard system into the Murack system. And it picks up in the fourth book in the series, which will be out next December. All things going well, with Arming Freedom, um, right outside the Murack 5 Stargate, because the Stargates are the only way to travel faster than light in this universe. And they are a point-to-point wormhole. And you can only go from one point to one point. So what they've done is they've taken all the Stargates. The species gets to anchor one end on the outside edge of their solar system. And it has to be there because the gravitational flux from a sun will disrupt the gate. And then the other end is anchored on the outside edge of the switchboard system. And the switchboard station is in orbit around the sun of the switchboard system. So to go anywhere, you basically have to go to the gate, travel through that gate to the switchboard system, travel from that gate to the next gate, which is going where you want to go. And it takes about a month and a half to 2 months to travel from a habitable world to another habitable world because of, to the switchboard system, switchboard station, sorry. And then again, a month and a half to 2 months to travel wherever you're going from there. So it creates some interesting political machinations. But in Freedom's Myth, the Ryan has to travel, and also with the aid supplies and so forth, he's finding that there's a lot of political machinations, and there's something fishy going on. I don't want to give too much of that away, but
that may be a little more literal than just
yes,
metaphorical.
yes,
Vaguely speaking.
yes. Don't call him sushi.
Yes.
Um, so, and it deals with some of the mechanics of actually what is involved in carrying cargo from one system to another. And also, it also goes into other species have myths and legends and histories. And I like to think that my aliens are not humans with bad nose jobs. Biologically, they certainly aren't, but I like to think that culturally they aren't. Because while being sentient is going to put some similarities on them, like I say about human culture, everybody has to eat, sleep, drink, breathe, and go to the bathroom. And that's going to force a lot of commonality onto any culture because it's going to have to fulfill those needs. So any living being is going to have commonalities, but where those commonalities and how they're fulfilled, how the needs are fulfilled, is where you start to get differences. Um, one of my favorite species are the spiderzoids. Now, short form, uh, Spiderzoid looks like a tarantula the size of an Irish wolfhound with 10 legs instead of 8. And its proboscis actually expands and contracts because obviously with an insect or an arachnid or anything like that, you have to add lungs if you want to beat the oxygen transfer limit and have it being much bigger than that. Um, so, but they don't breathe through a nose so much as they have these little vents that run along their backs, and these vent through in and out of their proboscis. In any case, the spiderzoids are pacifistic. They actually eat melons and various thick-skinned fruits, and they will thrust their snout. Maybe that's what the proboscis is. I'm getting grandiose with my language here, and I'm fouling myself. But anyways, they stick their snout and inject digestive juices into the melon, and then let it sit for a couple of minutes, and then drink it. And that's how they feed. Uh, they're complete vegetarians, herbivores, um, and pacifistic. The way that they would defend the tribe is they'd take the most expendable male from the group and say, great, you run away and get the predator to chase you and run away. And if you come back, that's good. If you get eaten, well, you were in service to the tribe. Have a nice day. So when you start looking at a creature that is that pacifistic, you start getting things that echo out from that. I mean, they don't have wars. And even as members of the Republic, they don't have wars. They will consider, if they are absolutely necessary, possibly hiring somebody to defend them. But that is the extent. And I will mention the naming convention if people are not familiar with it. Spiderzoid. Um, Species, generally speaking, cannot hear or make the sounds or light signals or whatever they use as communicative mediums of other species. So when it comes to naming species, it is the custom to pick a species that they superficially resemble from your home world and add a prefix or a suffix. So Homo sapiens have dubbed various species felinozoids because they look like 2-meter tall bipedal house cats, tigers and so forth, cheetahs. There's spiderzoids, there's otterzoids who have an interesting brain structure that you can have a lot of fun with. And so on. And some of the weirder ones, sycamorozoids. I don't know if they make an appearance. Yeah, they do make an appearance in Freedom's Myth, and they play a major role in arming freedom. And they look like the seed pods off a sycamore tree with cilia coming off the base. But, thus the name. So it only has to be a superficial similarity, completely visual, but it's how they dub it. And the felinozoids, who have something of a bizarre sense of humor, first met Homo sapiens, and they dubbed us masturbating ape. And generally Homo sapiens are not too fond of the nomenclature, of the nomenclature, but it was the Felinzoid's choice, and we actually we get along quite well with the Felinzoids overall. Uh, they think that we're a little bit too savage, but the
I mean, most of the Galactic Republic does, so.
mhm. Yes, well, there was some serious consideration of bombing us back into the Stone Age when we first made contact because they figured that sociologically we were just too violent. Didn't want to be. They didn't want to deal with us.
So, how much development have you put into all of these different alien races and their histories and their interactions with each other that hasn't made it into the books and probably won't?
Huge, huge amount. Um, I suffer from insomnia, and part of my process is I will lay there awake, grab a story string, and just start going, well, if this is true, this must be true, and then that must be true. Um, one of the actually, one of the elements that did make it into Freedom's Law was the fact that in their history, the Linosaurs were actually quite bigoted, easily as bigoted as humans have been. And, there's a line like one line, I think it was, I won't even get into what they did to leopard spots that tried to be treated with equality and dignity. And so, that's one aspect, and it's not played up much. Um, it is interesting how the bits that blip into it. I mean, in Freedom's Law, when you go to the courtroom scene, they have prior to the trial's beginning, they project images of scenes of justice from the history and myth of various species. And okay, for Homo sapiens, the weighing of the hearts from the papyrus of Ani, that famous Egyptian image of them weighing the heart of the deceased. And, that's a scene of judgment. There's also one with the angel over the lake of fire and the souls falling into it. In Freedom's, no, that doesn't occur in Freedom's Myth. But in one I'm currently working on, just to carry it on, I have a image of a Felinzoid who has had his teeth pulled and his claws pulled, strung into a necklace, draped around his neck, and is being dropped into a pit with a creature that vaguely resembles a wolverine. And it's just sort of what would be a really horrific, primitive justice for a feline zoid. So, yeah, a lot of stuff doesn't find its way in, but it's interesting the things that do bubble to the surface and suddenly say, hey, yeah, I could fit this in here.
Do you get a lot of opportunities in which you're writing something out and you end up adjusting something just so you can fit in some of this backstory that you've developed?
Yeah. Actually, it tends to pop up as an element for the back for when I'm actually writing in, and I don't have to adjust. I have to edit. I have to clean up, but it tends to flow into the river and just join that stream of consciousness. I I don't know about anybody's process but mine, but I think that I'm borderline multiple personality disorder. I've got to be. They're all in there screaming at me and yammering. And apart from
I
this
would do this.
Yes.
I should be the star of this scene.
Yeah, very much so.
So we have the third book just released now. The fourth book is complete, scheduled for release in a year from now, and you're currently writing the fifth book. Is it getting difficult to remember what exactly happens in each book?
Yes. Uh, I go back, have liberal use of the search command because I'll think, okay, this deals with that, and that was in this book, and I'll just go through the books, search some key element that's going to be common to them all, and just make sure that I have my ducks in a row. Because
I'm sure it must be particularly challenging with a series like this, which is very much just installments of a continuing story. It's not even like episodes, it's basically just getting to a good stopping point at the end of one book, but then the story's just picking up right where it leaves off in the next one.
oh yeah, it, it is tight. It is very tightly scripted, and at times, well, we had it with I think it was with Arming Freedom. You suggested that I take the beginning of Freedom's War and use that for the ending of Arming Freedom. A very good call. Very good call. Folks, if you want a great editor, this lady, fantastic.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Uh,
So, as you were mentioning earlier, this is your first trilogy, and it's the first time you've gotten to book three in a series. And again, you're currently working on book five. What is it about this series that has gotten you to write so much, so far into it, and especially so quickly?
the scope. I'm crafting an entire galactic society. And to the best of my knowledge, and I say the best of my knowledge, I haven't read anything that had the same kind of FTL limitations that I've placed on it. The whole thing of everything coming to the central switchboard, and that it taking literally months to travel from planet to planet. So you're not just bopping around, bam, 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 bam. And you're not going between stars. You're going to a stargate, blip, and then going to wherever you're going. Um, and the logic game, just the logical extrapolation of what that is going to do to a society. Um, Various species don't have a great deal to do with each other. They're aware of each other. There is trade, and there is exports and imports and so forth. But the majority of people never go away from their planet of birth. It's very much like, well, I think you can draw a parallel to the Norse. It took about a month to get from the Northlands in Europe to North America. Consequently, very few people did it. Um, I actually, at one point, have a very well off individual. He's a producer of a popular show, and he and his wife did a vacation to Earth. And he was complaining about how getting there and being in that little cabin for, over 2 months nearly drove them crazy. So it might be one of these things that you would do once in a lifetime. And then you have a few exceptional individuals like Ryan, who, because of his military career, and now because he owns his own spacecraft and he's running as a cargo service, and there's something else coming up that I'm not going to let out of the bag, but he's not a completely inept businessman, let's put it that way. Uh, he's bopped around the galaxy, and many people find this sort of, wow, that is so impressive. You've been to Murack, and what's it like there? And most people, if they want to touch the alien, touch aliens, experience aliens, they don't go as far as the switchboard system. Because in the switchboard system, every alien culture, and there's over 100 of them, has a station segment that is set up for their species. And it's their environment. It has green spaces, which are their environment. The temperature is the same. The humidity is the same. And it has effectively a city. And it's a city of about 1 million. So the switchboard system itself looks like a spiral staircase, and each one of the steps is a wedge that is one of these habitat areas. And then you have the common areas, which you can have groups of species that can inhabit. And I think that it's 13 species can inhabit the common area that Homo sapiens can. Because outside of that, the environments are too drastically different for them to cohabitate. Or you have viruses. There's the character Wispy, who is in Freedom's Myth. He's introduced there. And he is a waspzoid. And he is the only waspzoid that can cohabitate with Homo sapiens because he has had extensive adaptation to his immune system. He also is banished from his home world because of a trifling offense in the fact that one of the leaders wanted to effectively steal his future life. And he's also possibly the most annoying individual you've ever met.
I really found the story that Wispy shares. He gives a little bit of his backstory in Freedom's Myth. He's one of the several characters that does so. And I found it extremely intriguing, both in terms of the culture of the waspzoids as well as the reproductive cycle. Where did that idea come from?
It started actually with the baseline species I based the waspzoids with. They will capture caterpillars and inject eggs into the caterpillar. And the caterpillar is still alive as the larvae eat their way out. Then I thought of other insect species like the praying mantis and spiders, where after mating, the male gets eaten. And I kind of looked at that biological trend and thought, okay, you combine those two, that's easy enough to do. Then they're a sentient organism. Now, if the males are sentient as well, they're going to avoid mating as much as possible. They're really going to be, hey, when I'm old and gray, maybe, but until then, unless there's something in it for them. Then I went into, well, I've discussed with you before the experiments that they did with rats, where they trained a rat to run a maze, and then they fed that rat's brain to another rat, and they found that the new rat could learn that maze in about 1/6 the average time.
Hmm.
Yeah. So I took that idea of transference of memory and personality, actually, because we're the sum total of our experiences, um, and put that in so that one of the eggs laid is laid at the base of the brain of the male. And rather like many insect species, many species, period, there are some mammals who are very much like this. We have nerve ganglion going down our spine, mini brains. There are several mini brains that run down the back of the waspoid. The egg that's laid by the primary brain eats it, absorbs it, and emerges with the memories and personality of the male that was your father. The eggs that are laid by the mini brains, the nerve ganglion going down the spine, eat them and emerge knowing some basic things like, well, they I like to say they're born walking and toilet trained, which would be a great improvement as far as I'm concerned for human children. uh, and some basic skills that are repeated so often that they become ingrained in these mini brains, and they're more or less a reflex. So you have the sister and brothers, but the sister has the memories of the father's lifetime and is a continuation of the father. So I just sort of put a whole bunch of disparate bits of biology and interesting tidbits I'd heard about insects, lumped them together, and out came the waspoid. And
Well,
then
I love, yeah, the whole biology of it. It's and how it's worked into the culture as well. It's very unique in my experience in science fiction.
that's
So I have, go ahead.
I just said it's dark.
But it's not from the waspsoid's point of view, which is exactly how they take it. And I love all that detail in. I mean, you put it into every aspect of the series, and I guess that's one of the things that makes the series so big, as well as each of the books, is that you have so many point of view characters in these books. And compared to your other books, I know you do multiple points of view in your other series, but it tends to be like just a handful. Whereas, in these, they're probably about a dozen at least points of view characters,
Easily.
maybe more with incidentals.
Yeah, easily. And between Freedom's Myth and Arming Freedom, the number of point of view characters expands. And then about halfway through, well, yeah, a little past halfway through Arming Freedom, I'd say I start to collapse it down again. But I do have an idea for book 6. But book 6 is going to be a complete departure. It will be more or less a compilation of short stories set in the Switchboard universe, featuring Ryan and Rowan revisiting the various characters from the primary series and trying to make dreams come true.
Well, you certainly have a lot of room for all sorts of spin-offs with this series. So I look forward to seeing a lot more from it after the main story arc is complete.
I think I'm gonna be at this for a long time.
All right, well, I've got 6:35 on the clock here. Chat, if you have any questions or comments you'd like to share, feel free to chime in at any time. For now, shall we give a reading from the book?
Sounds good to me. Uh, let's see. Stars, is this? Okay. I'm going to skip the first one that I was going to do because we talked about the spiderzoids and the alien myths. So I'm going to jump into another one. Who will check on it? Okay. With that addressed, I have something I wish to give to my tree family in space. Among my species, if one comes to a new tree, one brings a gift. If one has no gift, the knowledge and skills one possesses are practiced as the gift. I would share a story of my people. I think this story is most like our tree dominance, Captain Ryan Chandler and Tree and Mountains. Ryan shrugged. I'm up for a story, and thank you. Kraken waved his forelegs and began speaking. And Kraken is a spiderzoid, I'll mention that. This happened during my people's Bronze Age. The story was first recorded on the Betagar leaves. The valley lands of Skrit suffered a drought that sent many nest trees to the ground. All was dying. The family of Crit, headed by the prime female Saga, were lucky in that their tree was by the river. In the tree of the Crit lived a male. He was named Sit Krut. In the language of Skrit, Sit translates as small and Krut as expendable. Sit Krut was indeed small. A day came when the sky was as black as night. Fire arched across the heavens like a harvest stick thrown into a granula tree. It hit the dry land and the forest flamed. The sky people, you might call them divine avatars or sacred ancestors, sounded their warning drum. Its beat echoed through the trees. The males and the secondary females took the egg sacs and what tools they could and raced down the tree behind Sardak. They crossed the river and kept running. Sitkrut ran with them, but as he crossed the river, he soaked the egg sac he carried. Sparks from the fire rained down on them. Flames were everywhere. First one egg sac caught fire, then another, but the damp silk of the sack Sitkrut carried resisted the flames. All forms of beasts ran together in the race to escape. Dark day surrendered to night, and still Sitkrut ran, struggling to keep up with his larger family members. Rain fell, dousing the fires and near drowning the land. When the sun rose, the family of Crit found themselves in a new valley. Many of them had fallen to the flames, and many had not. We have lost the eggs, cried the subordinate females. They're all burnt up. Sitkrut stepped forward and said, Not all the eggs are lost. I wet the bag I carried. It resisted the sparks. Sardak stepped forward and said, Why did you not soak all the egg sacs? Others had taken them before I could suggest it, said Sitkrut. Always an excuse, Sitkrut. Always an excuse. I saved the egg sac. There will be young this season. Will you give me my adult name? Asked Sitkrut. One act does not an adult make. We must find food, replied Sardak. We should prepare a nest tree first, in case there are dangerous animals, said Sitkrut. I have spoken. I hunger. Search for food. Sadrak settled herself under a tree holding the sack Sitkrut had saved. The family of Crit spread through the forest and soon found fruit trees. Then came the sound of Sadrak crying for help. Sitkrut raced to the base of the tree where he had last seen the prime female. Sadrak was halfway up the tree, holding onto the egg sack with one leg and trying to beat off a large centipede-like predator with her back legs. Sitkrut knew his duty as a male. He picked up a fallen stick and struck the centipede-like predator, then yelled and waved his legs. He was Sitkrut. The male's duty has always been to distract danger so the females would live to lay more eggs. He, as the smallest male, was the most expendable. Seeing what it thought would be easy prey, the predator chased Sitkrut, who scuttled into the forest, leaping from tree to tree, staying just far enough ahead of the predator that it didn't lose interest. The chase went on, but Sitkrut wasn't ready to be eaten that day. He had seen tracks nearby, and he ran towards them. After a long chase, Sitkrut entered a clearing where a huge centipede-like predator rested. His pursuer burst into the clearing. The two beasts saw each other. Centipede-like predators are territorial, so they began to fight. In the confusion, Sitkrut slipped away. He came to the tree where he'd last seen Sadrak, only to find the family gathered. They had already started removing the lower branches of the nest tree. The egg sac hung from the top branches. You have survived, said Sadrak, when she noticed Sitkrut. I led the predator into the territory of another of its kind, and they fought. We may now face two fewer of the beasts. I saved the egg sac. I thwarted the predator. Will you give me my adult name? Asked Sitkrut. Two deeds does not an adult make, Sitkrut. Sardak climbed the tree to where three males had woven her a hammock and settled herself. Sitkrut busied himself removing the branches and setting sharpened stakes so other predators would not climb the tree. The next day, Sadrak awoke and was hungry. She ordered her family to search for franto melons. Great Mother, while franto melons are very good, they are rare and hard to grow. Our food stores were destroyed in the fire. Would we not be better served by seeking out crumpa melons and granula trees? They grow quickly and can feed many, objected Sitkrut. I wish franto melons, ordered Sadrak. Sitkrut went into the woods and wandered until he came upon a grove of granula trees. Crumpra vines grew around their base, and the stream weaved its way through the forest. A nest tree rose tall and strong by the stream. She will never give me my adult name. I saved the egg sac. I thwarted the predator, and now I have found the food that will preserve the family. I will not tell her, for with her leading, our family is doomed. Collecting crumpa melons into a web sack, he returned to the family to find Sardak feasting on franto melons, while the rest of the family went hungry. Sitkrut shared his melons with the family members that had been kind to him, particularly the subordinate female, Sekras. The next day, while half of the family searched for franto melons, Sitkrut led his chosen to the fine tree and grove of fruit. For 3 days they prepared the nest tree, eating the granula fruit and crumpa melons. When all was in readiness, Sitkrut went to Sadrak and spoke. Sadrak, I saved the egg sac. I thwarted the predator. I have fed the family. Will you give me my adult name? You have brought me no franto melons, and you are small. I will not give you your adult name. If you will not, I will, interrupted Sekras. I name him Sel Kel, wise leader. You are subordinate. You may not name, stated Sekras. I am dominant in our new tree. Sakras waved her forelegs. Several of Selkel's chosen leapt up the tree to gather the egg sac. Family loyal to Sadrach tried to catch them, but Sadrach's followers were hungry and could not match the speed of their well-fed brethren. I saved the egg sac. I thwarted the predator. I have fed the family. I will keep the family safe. I am Selkel, spoke Selkel, not small and expendable any longer. The family of Crick divided. In the year that followed, Selkel's group prospered. 2 years later, the starving and injured remains of those that had stayed with Sardak were welcomed into the tree of Selkel, and Sekras, after Sardak, fell into the pincers of a centipede-like predator. Kraken folded his front legs and clicked his mandibles in a spider's bow. I kind of like that because.
Thank you. Yes, it was a nice moral story, and also gives some great background to the Spiderzoids.
Yeah, and it also I like to think that it echoes a lot of the human stories as well, because this stage of I have earned my name and you denied me. I have earned my name, you denied me. I have earned my name, you denied me, and I take it for myself. That's fairly common. And
Mhm.
I'm a mythology buff, so yeah, it's fun to play with that. Um, I have another one, and it's sort of a different take on mythology. To understand the sorry, itchy nose. To understand this one, I have to set the scene. After the disaster at Murack Five, the Homo sapien government tried to cover the fact that they were in danger of being set back to the Stone Age for the use of planet buster technology uh, from the common populace. The Felinzoids went the other route and went total disclosure and made a VR5. These don't have emotions. Your thoughts are your own, your feelings are your own, but all the sensory inputs are there. Entertainment that detailed basically from the disaster onward through several people. And Ryan being as pivotal as he was for this, they took his reports, um, took his image, and used it. And they had actors actually perform the roles, but they grafted the images of the people who actually did them during the disaster onto them. Rather similar technology to what they did with the modern movie Cats. The musical Cats that they did, which I don't care what the critics say. I think it's some of the best cinematography and some of the one of the best movies to come out in the last decade. Love that movie.
It's also reminds me of Star Wars. Rogue One, I think it was, had Grand Moff Tarkin, who the actor has been dead for many years, and through the magic of CGI, they got him on screen.
Yeah, and it's been used for several things. They used it for some Voyager episodes. And there's a kids movie, Monster House, where they actually used animated figures that were animated by actors who had all the dots put on them and were being scanned. And so, yeah, and I figure, given how advanced their technology is, it's a no-brainer that they'd be able to do that. So, Rowan has wanted to better understand Ryan, and she's gone into experience what happened at Murack Five in this fictionalized version. And she's taken on Kate's perspective for people who have read Freedom's Law. And Kate was there, and she's in a younger version of Kate than the one that we met. Yesterday's tears. Captain, we have full maneuvering on port forward, estimate 10 minutes for port midships, spoke a voice from behind and to the left of Rowan Kate's perspective from the pilot station on the Starhawk's bridge. Good. How is Gastro doing with the stealth systems? Rowan recognized the second voice. She wanted to turn around but couldn't. A moment later, her perspective shifted. Ryan sat in the captain's chair wearing the blue coverall uniform of the UES Spacing Corps, with no retiree's braid across the shoulder patches. There was a captain's insignia on his chest, but no civilian spacer's pin at his collar. There were the beginnings of gray in his hair, and the skin on the left side of his face around the eye was a shade off in coloration and seemed younger. Rowan realized that he had the beginnings of crow feet on the right side. Chief Gastro reports that stealth is at 99.5% on the port side and should be full within the hour. Stardusted nanos, you'd think the blasted things had tribes the way they fight against overlapping domains. Ryan shook his head. Kate Rowan's vision swept over the bridge. Each station was occupied by a uniformed officer. Lieutenant Montgomery, put me through to Major Chiden on the big screen. Rowan's perspective shifted to the main screen, where a handsome, muscular woman with skin so black it deserved the name was shown in profile, sitting at a desk with what looked like a map filling the wall in front of her. Well, Annie, what's the status with the ground teams? Am I going to have to have time to put lipstick and mascara on my lady love? Asked Ryan. None of the teams have encountered any patrols. I think you were right. The putty cats don't like the cold. You should have time to buy your lady a new dress. Good to hear. Engineering. An alarm filled the bridge, then abruptly cut off. All ships, all combatants. This is a Republic-level disaster notification. There has been an anti-proton containment breach on the Western continent. Global consequence expected. A moment passed in absolute silence that was broken by Ryan's voice. Communications to all posts. Aye, sir. All posts, replied the young man at the communications console. All exterior teams, this is the captain. Return to the vessel, emergency evac. If you can't make it back, you will be left behind. Major Chimbudan, order your extraditionary teams to congregate here. Use the vehicles to pick up any of our people we leave behind. Get them under cover in preparation for an atmospheric blast wave and await further orders. Navigation. Plot a course to the closest Kangarozoid settlement. But, sir, the restriction, objected the middle-aged woman that sat to Rowan's left. Do it. Kate, get us into the air as soon as the hatch closes. Get us to that Kangarozoid village yesterday. Rowan Kate felt her throat vibrate as her voice snapped out. Yes, Captain. Her fingers caressed the console before her. Rowan fixated on how the skin of her hand was several shades darker than she was used to, and the fingers were stubbier. A minute passed, and the communications tech spoke. Hatches closed. Kate, now, ordered Ryan. Rowan knew the tone. Captain Chandler was in the big chair. Communications transmitted non-combatant status on a loop. I'm taking us out of the war, ordered Ryan. Sir, Nova Blast, don't question him when he's like this, thought Rowan. Now, snapped Ryan. Yes, sir. The young voice replied with a note of fear. Clouds swept by on the main screen. Communications, Major Shinbuden. Bolan, I'm going to need anybody you still have on board with hazmat or EVA ratings. Suited up and ready to move. Get anything we have in the hangar manned and outdoor ASAP. Ship wide. There was an antimatter containment breach on the western continent. We have no details yet, but there is likely a radiation wave heading towards this side of the planet. We can't do much, but I am declaring this vessel a humanitarian relief asset. We will touch down as close to Kangazoid villages as possible and get as many Kangazoids into our hull as we can before the radiation wave hits. Exterior teams, grab as many plant and animal samples as you can as we get the Kangazoids loaded. Don't be pretty about it, just get it done. The big screen shifted so that it showed the terrain below. A moment passed. Captain, we are over the closest village, stated the navigator. Kate, take us down into that gap between those two hills. With our loading bay to the village. It will create a natural funnel. Communications, Major Chabunin, Bolan, I'm sharing my screen. I think our best bet is to run the field ambulance and damaged grav tank out of the far side of the village to the far side of the village and use them to herd the Kangazoids forward into the bay. Do we have enough troops to contain them? On the sides. Negative. We left most of our ground personnel behind. Sir, there's a message coming in from the flying Zoids, blurted Montgomery. Translate and put it through. Starhawk, we read and acknowledge your non-combatant status and declare our own. We are 10 kilometers west of your position and closing. I am Master Sergeant Sagal Slingmaster, commanding the Fang-class mobile field unit, Bloodkill. Are you able to shield the Kangazoid village? Put me through and loop in. Shinbuden, loop in Shinbuden. Sergeant Slingmaster, I will have an empty hangar bay. If I can get them into it, we can protect some of them. I'm sending you a map graphic. Can you secure the ridge line to the west of the village? Affirmative. We could use another vehicle for driving them forward from the village, interjected Major Shinbuden. We can provide that as well, replied Saga. Only if your people are suited. I'm expecting resistance. Spears may not be much, but why take the chance? Added Ryan. We'll be suited, said Sagal. Roger that. I'll use my people on the east, remarked Major Shinbuden's voice. That's a real name, by the way. It's African, but it's harder to do than the ones I've made up. A shudder ran through the Starhawk as it set down. Sir, command informs that the Moorhawk has been obliterated. All anti-proton stores released. The Osprey has taken heavy damage from the shockwave. The Kestrel has ascended to orbit, leaving all auxiliary craft and personnel behind. The shockwave is traveling at 1,323 kilometers per hour and is expected to reach us in 15 hours and 32 minutes. Blast site radiation levels are above hull specifications. The feline Zoids report that the cruiser Gurhismar was hit by the radiation wave. All crew lost. Montgomery's voice broke. Horror entered his tone. That's 500 to 600 feline Zoids dead. Stardust, said Kate's voice. Steady. Montgomery, relay to the Kestrel support craft to get cover behind them and between them and the shockwave. Then once it's passed to converge on our location. The blast dynamics will see that most of the rad will have dissipated into space. What we'll get is the irradiated dust carried by the shockwave. We should be safe enough inside our ships and suits. Montgomery, put me through to Kadar. Kadar, how much do you know about Kangazoids? The image of a fit, middle-aged man of Middle Eastern extraction filled the screen. Not much. A few biochemical principles common to creatures evolved on gopherzoid worlds. You're going to have to learn fast. Figure out what we can feed them. We're going to have guests. Prep for radiation treatment. Homo sapiens, feline zoids, and Canoan. Nova Blast. Kadar blanched and nodded. How bad? I'll let you know. You have about 15 hours to get ready for hell on Murack 5. Ryan sounded grave. Communications, ship-wide. Commander Phillips and Lieutenant Chang to the bridge. Navigation. Find the next closest village and lay in a course. And the one after that. Communications. Contact our support vehicles and tell them to transport personnel from the South Pole landing and rendezvous at the third Kangazoid village. That should give them time to rally and make the trip. Come on, Kate. It's time to put our EVA ratings to the test. Bolandi, Lee, is going to need every qualified body she can get. There's nothing more we can do here but close the door when we get them tucked in. Aye, sir, replied Rowan Kate. She could feel sweat prickling her brow and hear a tremor in her voice, but Rowan's emotions were her own. The scene cut to one of the descending Starhawks hangar, to one of her descending the Starhawk's hangar ramp in an EVA suit and running towards a ridge of low hills to her left. The ambulance and a grav tank with blast damage visible on its side flew over the valley on either side of the river that snaked through the valley. Glancing down the valley, she could see a collection of huts. Kangazoids stared up in what she could only interpret as fear and awe. Reaching her location on the ridge, she looked across to the row of hills on the western side of the river basin. A triangular feline zoid grav tank flew the length of the hills, dropping troops at regular intervals, then joined the two human ships at the back of the valley. The three vehicles touched down and drifted forward. The Kangazoids startled. A small band of them picked up stone-tipped spears and leapt at the approaching behemoths. They struck, the spears shattered, and the mechanical beasts came on. They've got guts. Ryan's voice came over her suit's channel. Montgomery, patch me through to orbital command on a private van. If we can get the Kestrel to deploy, we could double our pickup. Who knows, the feline zoids and Canoans might pitch in. The majority of the Kangazoids started bounding towards the hills. Kate saw one leaping towards her, with the child held tight against its chest by its stunted lower arms. Kate fired her sidearm into the air, creating a wall of sound and light. The Kangazoid bounded back towards the valley floor. The scene was repeated up and down the ridgeline. Kate and the other foot troops closed in from the hills, while the ground vehicles pushed forward. Kangazoids bombarded their rescuers with everything that came to hand, but they were inextricably driven to the Starhawk. Is that the lot? Snapped Kit Ryan's voice. I've got stragglers, came the battle squawk from the Feline-zoid tank. Rowan recognized Segal's voice. Load them up if you can. Otherwise, leave them. We've only 11 hours left, ordered Ryan. Kate leapt from her position on the hill and charged towards the spot where the Feline-zoid tank sat by the scattered grass huts of the village, with its hatch open. Kangazoid warriors postured and threatened with their spears. A tabby-striped Feline-zoid stood by the hatch in an EVA suit with the helmet off. One of the Kangazoids thrust at the Feline-zoid, who sidestepped, caught the spear by its shaft, and ripped it out of the primitive's hand before he grabbed the warrior and single-handedly tossed him into the tank. Another Kangazoid thrust at the Feline-zoid's back. Kate caught the spear, crushing its shaft with the enhanced strength of her suit, then jerked the Kangazoid forward. The tabby stripe grabbed the Kangazoid by the back of its neck, and tossed it into the tank. Thank you, Homo sapiens. remarked the flying Zoid. Anytime. Name's Kate. Sagal. Together they grabbed another Kangazoid and tossed it into the tank. Just to be sure, what happens when they get aboard? Asked Kate. My medic has a Kangazoid safe sedative, explained Sagal. Good. Kate grabbed a Kangazoid in each of her suit's arms, picked them up, shook them, and threw them into the tank. She then paused, gestured at the remaining Kangazoids, and pointed at the tank like a mother admonishing a naughty child. The Kangazoids looked amongst themselves. Sagal picked up a fallen spear, casually snapping it in two, and then gestured for the primitives to enter the tank. Another look passed between the Kangazoids before they dropped their spears and walked single file into the tank. We work well together, remarked Sagal. Hold that thought. Kate opened her radio channel. Starhawk, pass it on to the doc and the captain. The Feline-zoids have a Kangazoid safe sedative. Over. Message received, and thank the divine. The hangar bay is really jumping, and not in a good way. Over, replied Montgomery's voice. I'll take you to the next village, offered Sagal, as Kate Rowan watched the Starhawk rose into the air and flew upstream along the river's course. I'd appreciate that. Captain Prawley figures he can use the trackers in our suits to collect stragglers before the rad wave hits. I'd rather not be sidelined. This captain, what is his name? Asked Sagal. Ryan Chandler. Kate followed the flying Zoid into his grav tank. The space mink, like Predator? I'm glad I'm on your side in this. Between him and the star eagle-like Predator, it is a wonder we didn't lose this war months ago. The main room of the grav tank was a rectangular chamber with sleeping cubicles cut into the walls, three atop one another. The back corners were filled with what could only be a galley and a privy, while the back wall was a series of hatches. The forward wall held a sliding door at its center. A burly cougar-tan Feline-zoid male stood in front of the sliding door, holding a tubular pressurized injector in one claw-tipped hand. The Kangazoids were stretched out on the floor asleep. Makara, this is Kate. We are bringing her with us. Murack is my field medic. Pleasure to meet you. Perhaps circumstances. Kate bowed as best as her EVA suit allowed, while touching her fingertips together in front of her. It is to be embraced that we are not shooting at each other. Murack bowed with his fingertips touching. Can you tell my captain the sedative safe doses for the Kangazoids? Kate followed Sagal to the sliding door in the wall that retracted to reveal a two-seat control room. Murack spoke to her back. I contacted my command when your chatter revealed you didn't have one. They said they'd forward the information. Sagal snorted. Do it directly on my authority. You know what the officers are like. Can't find their tail with two hands and a sniffer bot. Sagal sat in a command chair, deftly slipping his tail into a control interface at its back. Kate Rowan sat in the other chair. Rowan felt like a child on adult furniture because of her size. Sagal glanced at a screen on his control console. It was filled with the flowing script of the flying Zoids. Captain Chandler's orders are for the support vehicles to pick up any Kangazoids left behind, then to rendezvous with the Starhawk. The ground personnel are to loot the village of anything useful and get it under reflective tarps and a layer of dirt to keep it from becoming irradiated. Good news is the uncomplimentary names for officers in command have called a ceasefire and are deploying all surface ships to Operation Shelter. Put that first lot of food into the vehicles. We're going to need something to feed our guests in the short term. I don't think our ration packs will do the job. Major Lanny's voice came over Kate's radio. A moment later, Kate Rowan glanced back to see EVA-suited troops, both felinoid and Homo sapiens, carrying baskets and clay pots into the crew compartment of the grav tank. "What's this?" demanded Sagal. "Lunch. Major Bolani says they need at least some Kangazoid food on the Starhawk right now." Kate shrugged. "Stardust. With Homo sapien officers like this, I see what some fury will take over the galaxy," quipped Sagal. The scene shifted. The savannah of Murack Five swept across on the grav tank's screen. "The Starhawk is ready to crack the hatch as soon as they finish anesthetizing their first load. Good thing I told Macro to break with channels. Those idiots still haven't gotten the information through. Turns out it's a common painkiller for Homo sapiens." And I'm going to leave it there because the section goes on and on. But
there are some great details, but yeah, that was a great reading. Thank you. And especially at the third book in the series, it's nice to learn, what happened there because, it's been referenced since the first book.
Yep. Well, I mean, it's sort of like dealing with a vet who's been through hell in real life, because they're not going to blurt it out to somebody who's new, somebody who's a stranger. But a lot of the time, they really need to talk. And I had a friend who was in the African campaign with the British military, and he saw savagery that no one should see. And of course, my father was a World War II vet, and North Atlantic Squadron. And well, he did not go on many missions. He was, because of his age, he didn't join till the end of the war. He lost a lot of friends, and for most of my father's life, I occupied the position of best friend and confidant. So I got a lot of things passed on.
That's nice.
Yeah.
So what else do you have in the works right now? Because I know this year you've released the sequel to Nuke Kubi, as well as the sequel to
Horn of the Kraken.
Horn of the Kraken, yes.
Yes. Revenant and the Mistletoe Spear, respectively. I'm currently, I've just started edits on Lycanthrope, which is the third book in the Chronicles of Ray McAndrews, Nuki Kubai, Revenant, Lycanthrope. And I have completed the rough draft of Wolf's Son, which is the third book in the Bastard Prince saga, which is Horn of the Kraken, Mistletoe Spear, Wolf's Son. And the Bastard Prince saga will probably conclude with the Solar Shard, which I haven't started yet, but I have obviously the basic conflict for. So I have those two on the go. I am currently trying to market a book that Deep Black Charter. It may come your way eventually, but I wanted to try Penguin first because, okay, let's be honest. If I get a book through Penguin, that's not recognizability, and it's probably going to do us both some good, because you sell one there, you get the others. But it is a relatively near future science fiction where we have a viable interplanetary technology, but no FTL. And it takes a couple of months to get to Mars. and it takes the better part of a year and a half, 2 years to get to the orbits of Neptune and Uranus. And a terrorist group released a bioweapon that wiped out probably about 9/10 of the world's population.
Mm.
As such, the various drift stations and ships and so forth that had once protected, helped to alleviate the overpopulation problem. Most of the people have been called back from that. And it's discovered that a faction of the terrorist group may have been the ones that hijacked the Far Traveler, mankind's first attempt to send a century ship to another star system, and could be using it as a base to make a new Armageddon virus. And the spy agency that gets this masquerades as a news agency because reporters have an excuse for being where they don't belong. So they hire a private charter on the basis of making a docudrama about the Far Traveler. And it's called Quest for the Far Traveler because they're hoping to find it somewhere between the orbits of Neptune and Uranus. And it's more or less the story of the trip. It riffs a little bit on 2001: A Space Odyssey, where it's the actual voyage is really what the story is about. And the primary conflict really doesn't come in until the last little bit of it because it's really just an excuse for the voyage. From a dramatic point. For the characters involved, well, it's their lives and it's far more than that. But I'm trying to market that right now. And once that's...
Well,
yeah.
As though that's not enough. Well, I am envious of your output, your dedication, and I guess you must be spending like a few hours every evening or, whenever your free time is, just typing away, hey?
Pretty much. It's a passion. And I have certain
Got all
things.
those words rattling around in there, and the only way to get them out is to put them on the
Yeah.
page.
Yeah. Well, Ryan occasionally hits me upside the head and says, "Okay, get on with it. Get on with it." Rowan's a little bit more gentle in her persuasions. Katoya is outright embarrassing.
Yeah.
But hey, you decide what you want to do, and then you do. And I've been at this for a long time. Deep Black Charter, the one that I'm trying to do with Penguin, I think it was Penguin, right now, it was written actually initially about 10 years ago. And it's been
Okay.
edited and improved upon since. But the interesting thing was, I wrote the initial draft of Nuki Kubai from the Chronicles of Rainic Andrews. That was written 20 years ago, maybe 25.
Okay.
When it first came out, it was actually titled Rokuro Kubai because there was a mistake in the book of myths and legends that I got the antagonist from, and they had misnamed it. And a Rokuro Kubai is actually a female yare that extends its neck to python-like lengths and will choke the life out of abusive men. Uh, Overall, from the myths I've read, quite benign for somebody who isn't trying to slap women around. So the whole concept good and evil gets a little bit blurry there because I have to side with the Rokuro Kubai. The Nuki Kubai is a little bit of a different duck. They are nasty critters. And of course, that all goes, a lot of it goes into culture too. I have the Batzoids, who are really fun characters to write because he's a hitman. They call it a vengeance proxy, but he's a hitman. But in his culture, that's perfectly acceptable because you wouldn't have accepted the hit unless it was for good reason. And no one would take out the hit unless it was for good reason. So this is their legal system. But he basically, oh yes, this person stole from you. Well, fine, for a fee, I will take it out and they'll never steal from you again. um,
Now, one thing I've wondered about, because this Batsoid character that you're talking about is also from the entertainment that Rowan was liberated from.
yeah,
And a number of the other alien creatures on that show reference the history of their worlds or whatever. So it makes me wonder, because, this is just an entertainment, how much of the history that they know is actually accurate, the history and culture and such that they've been fed as part of the cloning process to create them for the program. How different is it?
it's actually quite accurate in a winners write the history kind of way. The way that they imbibe the memories is they take a memory graft from a actual living person. They dice it up and then they will remaster it, sort of like making a mixtape, to get a personality type. So one of the things, I don't know if it might be in Freedom's Myth, uh, but I have the thing that they're talking about Kendra's memories, and her initial personality gets stalled. The initial memories that they use to create the baseline character has about an 80% similarity to Rowan's. And as such, the natural way things would go with them is that it would be kind of like older sister, younger sister, because there's a similarity of type that is there. And they did much the same with the aliens. They'd hire aliens to have their memories copied and then dice them up and put them together to create the nasty pieces of work that most of the pirates are.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's in Freedom's Myth. I actually get into the Octozoid Commander a little bit. And I talk about how he was a decorated captain in their navy, and then everything went to hell. And I also get into the Otterzoid, how she, when she finds out, Shia, I believe the name is, she finds out that it's all a lie. She didn't do the things that she did in her youth. And she's saying, this is wonderful. I'm not guilty of all these horrible things. It washes clean my soul. And actually, it's a him. Man, she is a him. I have to think with the Otterzoids because a lot of their nature is kind of inverted male to female from the Homo sapien. So I have to keep coming back to that.
Ah.
Um, but it's the thing of, yeah, for some of the aliens and, well, some of the humans as well, you find out, hey, I'm not the evil SOB I thought I was. And that's going to factor more and more as time goes by because it's a second chance. Also, now, yeah, Freedom Smith goes to that point, so I won't go beyond that. We'll save that for next year.
Yes. um, and now let's talk a little bit more about the characters, uh, the clones who are still stuck in the E-Entertainment in Sun Valley, because we've spoken a bit about Ryan and Rowan and about the aliens and everything, but there's a major secondary plot line, and this is throughout the series, about the clones still in Sun Valley who have learned the truth of their existence. And particularly in this book, Medwin and his group become kind of frontline characters about that. So you want to tell us a bit more about them?
Well, Medwin and his group are from a defunct series. It went basically one half season called Sci-Fi Geeks. And as such, they've been relegated into basically extra status. And they wander around the background. They're the person who serves your coffee in the cafe, the lifeguard that's sitting in the lifeguard chair watching the pool. They're There are these background characters you need to make the set region work. Medwin himself is a tree planter because tree planting is the baseline industry for the set region. And they just never question where the profit is being made for planting trees because people need to breathe and so forth. Um, so he's a tree planter, which is about the lowest job you can have. And he's from a poor family. His father was a police officer who was, he finds out during the during Freedom Smith that his father was killed to supply dramatic tension for one of the seasons of homicide life on the streets. And this comes as kind of a negative to him, obviously. Um, so, as such, because they are such unimportant extras, they're not actively monitored by the studio. Um, they're classed non vital, which is one step up from do not assist. Do not assist means let them die. Non vital means, hey, if you happen to see something going down, you can fix it, intervene if you like. And these are instructions for the controllers. Well, he and his little group, because they are not actively monitored most of the time, one, they've been co opted to supply emotional input for the primary storyline in the sections that don't have emotional feeds. So they're watching a television version of the events with Ryan and Rowan, and their emotions are being recorded to be dubbed onto this so that the entertainment will be complete. Um, and they also have a lot of time when they're completely unmonitored, so they are ideal for slipping out of the set region and confirming things and gathering things that are necessary for the fight. And they become the primary intelligence operatives for the rebellion. And I don't want to give away the major thing that happens to them during Freedom's Myth, because I think that it's better the reader get that as it goes. so they can see it and have the build up. But they evolve, and they're on that thing. They're just finished high school. They're moving into first year university. Uh, Medwin barely, because he can hardly afford it, due to the fact that he's had to help support his family. But they're going through that cusp between childhood and adulthood that happens during those years. Because when you're in high school, you're in high school. High school is always the same because the people are always the same. They're the same age, the same basic conflicts. Um, Now they're in university and they're making their own way and they're evolving. And they're evolving as people. And also, they've had this whole thing of, what do you mean we're entertainment clowns? And they're evolving as warriors in a sense. Medwin suffers a major emotional trauma, worse, well, added to the fact that his father was killed to be a victim for a homicide investigation. And he goes a little off the deep end. But he pulls back before he completely fouls the waters. Um, but you also realize that, yeah, he may not have any special powers, but you know what? Neither does Batman. Or more accurately, neither does Green Arrow. And he does quite an evolution. He's also interesting in so much as he's an incredibly average guy. I mean, he's better than average intelligence, but looks, you'd cross him on the street and not look twice. Then you have Kendra, who is the smarty pants of the group. And she, as I said, her baseline personality is an 80% of the same material went into it as Rowan's. They both have the collapsing bouncy castle memory, as an example. And she's got this real sense of adventure. And it's sort of, in a way, she looks at having the world turned upside down as positive, because the last thing she wanted was an ordinary life. And now here she is, a science fiction fan who suddenly finds out going to other planets, working on a spaceship is a real possibility. It's going to take a lot to get there, but it's a real possibility. Astronauts aren't a few hundred people who have been pioneering the way. They're people who are actually doing this as their everyday job. And she's really, really taken with that. Then you have Obert. Oh, Obert, who meets Carol. And Carol is a couple of years older than Obert. And Carol actually started off on Sci-Fi Geeks. And she was a couple of years ahead of them in high school. And then after the series wrapped, they did a little post insertion work on her and co-opted her into the Orgy Girls special features. And you don't know whether Obert is the luckiest guy in the world or whether he is really messed up. But they start dating, and things spin out of that. Um, and of course, there's Jessica, who um, is an interesting thing with telepaths. That if they are too genetically similar, they have a tendency of blending. And since human telepathy is normally very weak, but Gunther has been genetically engineered to have Otterzoid level telepathy. He comes in contact with Jessica from the show Defenders of the Crystal. And Jessica is Defenders of the Crystal is modern fantasy. And she's a telepath. She sees it as a sorceress of the mind, is how she conceptualizes it. But she's a telepath. And what in fact they did was they took the same genetic and just changed the the Y chromosome to an X, or the X chromosome to the Y. So they are basically biologically brother and sister, but their minds start meshing. And the danger is, well, at one point I put megalomaniacal super telepath hell bent on galactic domination. Um, and I think for reading the book just to find out what that entails is good enough. Um, so yeah, there's a lot going on in the set region. And at the same time, they have to keep the pretense of their show going. So you're getting the snippets from Angel Black as those storylines are played out. And at the same time, when they go into the jamming area, they're trying to plan the uprising of the clones. And with the Medwin's group going out, you're finding out that there are a lot of the regular humans who actually would be in favor of clone rights, who would be in favor of at least the medical variety being treated better, and even some concessions for the studio clones. But there's nothing to galvanize them. There's nothing really to draw them together and get their voices to combine. Whereas the group that the humans ascendant, who really don't like clones and are quite evangelical, and they behave almost like a religion, they do not want clones to have rights. They do not want clones to exist. And if they had their way, there would be no clones, there would be no AIs, and humans would basically shut themselves away from the rest of the Republic and have nothing to do with the alien species. At the same time, they really appreciate a lot of the technology that we've gained by having things to do with the alien species. So I put a lot of groups that I don't like into that.
And it's also interesting how there's so many different shades of feelings toward clones and the idea of clones getting rights. And you see this a lot in the second book, in Freedom's Law. You have the doctor who, basically considers Rowan like an animal, doesn't see her as a human being at all. But you've got, various levels. He's also not a human descendant type person. You've got one character who's like, and this is someone who's actually emulated Rowan in her appearance, but she's like, well, no, they're just clones. Why should they have rights? I think, these guys have the right idea, but oh, you're offering me something for helping out with this scheme. Okay, sure.
Yeah, a
And
union job. Yeah.
exactly. And I love all that little detail, even with those incidental characters like that.
Yeah. Well, you talk to people on the street and you listen to them, and you have people who. Oh, one of the great things: people who have no bias whatsoever, again on the basis of cultural heritage, but they don't like immigrants. That's sort of no. If you were born here, yeah, no problem. But no, I don't want somebody coming in and taking our jobs.
Hmm.
Uh, and you have all this range. Humans are never black and white. We're all shades of gray, and it's where on the various gray spectrums you are that determines what I consider somebody's moral worth. I mean, I know some people they look at some of my viewpoints and they get really testy about it because they're on one extreme, and I don't go as far on that extreme, although frankly I believe with about 90% of what they're saying and agree with it entirely. But that last 10% means that they don't like me. And that's just how it is. And I think the mature people realize that no, you don't have to be 100% on somebody's side as long as you're not 100% against them. And there's a lot of common ground in that, in the gray area.
Hmm.
Uh, I tried to I tried to show that a little bit in the books, and I think that's what came through. And you have Mike, who is given his job, you'd think that he would be a raving anti-clone rights fanatic, and actually, he's trying to change the system from the inside. But he's kind of come to the realization that if he's going to succeed in changing the system, if you confront it directly, it's not going to happen because it's easy to guard against that kind of attack. With the dealing with bias of the type that I deal with in the with the clones, you almost have to do the hearts and minds stage before you can get to the civil rights stage, because you have to have those who support the current power structure galvanized to say, no, we want what we want. And the extremists that are against it, well, do they have any reason to be against it? Can't they just live their life and leave other people alone? And that's the other thing. One of the first rules I have about things in my own life is it any of my bloody business? If it isn't, I don't care. You know, and that tends to come through with a lot of my positive characters too. That attitude, you got to write close to home.
Hmm.
If you can write an antagonistic character that is everything that you dislike, but if you want I think your positive characters to ring true, you've got to put some for yourself in there. Which doesn't mean they have to be carbon copies of you, and they shouldn't be carbon copies of you. I mean, Rowan is a little bit on the fanatical side on the clone rights side of things. She cannot, and reasonably so because she's lived the very worst aspects of it. But, she's all for pulling SETI down and doesn't want to acknowledge the fact that SETI has been instrumental in terraforming a lot of worlds, creating spaces for humanity. It's a major employer. Uh, it already, in the last, uh, 50 years under Michael's influence, has humanized the treatment of clones and actually has moved into a system whereby the revolution is possible, whereas in earlier times it wouldn't have been. And it's taken 50 years to do it, but it is now possible. Just the fact that it's early 21st century for the Set region. That made Rowan's transition to the technology of, the far future technology a lot easier because she had some basis in physics and chemistry and an understanding of you don't necessarily need to know why when you press the button, throw the switch, the light comes on. But you need to know that if you throw that switch, the light will come on. There has to be a causal connection somewhere. I was stunned that years ago I met a person who lived in Canada all their life, who did not know that a wire ran from the light switch to the light. They were oblivious to that. But they knew that if you threw the switch, the light came. And they could function. Don't ask me how. But also, Mike is doing it. Another reason, and it's brought up in Cloning Freedom, they're setting up the Kemetic Set region during the course of the books, which is ancient Egypt. And basically, it would be far harder for somebody transiting from that. But also, they're using a slower fast clone process for the new Kemetic Set region, which grants basically a 60-year life expectancy. And as Mike says, that was pretty close to the human average for a very long time. And he's trying to, because he's realized that, one, it would be an economic disaster for the UES if the e-entertainments were to just stop. Two, would likely be rioting. And there's no way that he could swing that. So Mike, being the realist that he is looking to bring about the next stage. And you have, with Tansy, that is one of the elements that is very important. She kind of sums it up that laws that seek to give clones equal rights and privileges are inevitable. If it happens slowly, society can adjust and incorporate, and it'll be easier. If society fights against it, the pressure will build and it will happen explosively, destroying structures and forms that need not be destroyed and increasing the suffering for all as it happens. But it will happen. And I think this is something that a lot of politicians have to come to grips with, that The only constant is change. Uh, and you have to say, is it a positive change? If it does the most good for the most people without overly burdening the minority, then probably it is. So why fight against it? Uh, Look at ways to capitalize it. Well, capitalize on it. Look at things you can do. But unfortunately, people get stuck in the old way of doing things, and they don't. And one of the great departure for fiction, great departures in writing fiction, is that you get to play with these concepts. You get to be your own arbitrator and say, well, if this happened, I could have this happen. Now, obviously, you're probably pie in the sky, wish fulfillment, but what the heck's wrong with that? You've got to have a dream
Mhm.
for a dream to come true.
That's true.
Talkie
All
talkie.
right. So we've got about 9 minutes left. Um, One other thing which I'm not sure if I've addressed in the previous launch parties is what was your main goal? What originally drove you to write this series, to start from the beginning?
I thought I could do it justice. And I wanted to, in a way that wasn't preachy, address issues of bigotry. And I've since heard the term othering. And while I didn't have the term othering when I started cloning freedom, it really sums up a lot of what I'm doing with the books. I'm exploring how we treat the other and how the other responds to that. That was one of the elements. The main element is that I just thought I could write a really good story about it, and I also just I got Rowan in my head, and she was bopping around, and I really wanted to do something with Rowan. So I did. And then Ryan, I wanted to, I like to write engineers because there's an engineering mindset, which is okay, we have a problem. Let's break it down into its component parts and we'll fix the parts. And if we fix enough of the parts, we'll fix the problem. And I like characters that do that. Well, I mean, you look at Brad and Tabby in the Tinker books.
Mhm.
I I like writing engineers, and I wanted to play with something that goes on today. There are people who collect tanks, and they have working 10, 12, 13 working tanks. If they ever wanted to man it and send people out, they could be hell on wheels. There are people, not just museums, but private citizens who collect military aircraft. And I wanted to look at it and say, human nature at its core doesn't change. And I wanted to bring that in. So, like with most of my books, I often say that you don't create a book, you weave it, because you bring all these disparate elements together and you see how they can interconnect and how one leans on the other and how they twist each other. And the weaving started and it sort of grew from there. And it's still growing
Mm-hmm.
and growing and growing.
Well, it's done very well so far. Any final thoughts you'd like to share?
Just please read, please review, and I hope you enjoy it. I think you will.
It's
And if you want some,
available. Yep, go ahead.
and if you want something to keep your lips moving for a long time, well, we've got the word count.
Yep, so Freedom's Myth, it is out. You can order it into bookstores everywhere, Amazon, Chapters Indigo, Barnes and Noble, Waterstones in the UK. Anywhere you order books, you can find it. It's in trade paperback and ebook format, as well as a dyslexia formatted edition, as with the previous two books. That's with, hang on, I can get an example. So we have our dyslexia formatted edition of the books, which has greater line and character spacing and non-justified text, a number of small changes just to help those who live with dyslexia to read it easier.
And they read like silk. Dyslectic here, kind of, I think, the inspiration for the dyslectic version. And I'll tell you, they read like silk. It just, the eye smooth.
So those others of you out there who have dyslexia, check it out. We have versions on, again, all the major bookstores of all three books. And thank you, Stephen, for such a great conversation tonight. Great insight into this book and the series in general.
Well, thank you for having me, and thank you for being a great editor and a great partner on bringing these out.
Well, I love these books, and I am so happy to continue releasing them. And yeah, check it out online, brain-lag.com. Stephen also has his own website. That was StephenPearl.com.
Yes, StephenPearl.com, StPhenPearl.
All right. So thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. And I hope you have a great rest of your weekend.
Toodles.